Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast, Birth Story Friday. In this episode, Roxanne is going to be sharing all 3 of her birth stories. She had 2 unmedicated hospital births and 1 unmedicated freestanding birth center birth, and she's going to be talking about how the support that she had both during her pregnancy and her labors helped her to have an empowering experience for all 3 of her births. Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And I'm Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable, because pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experience as mothers navigating this stage in our lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you have chosen us to support you.
Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. Roxanne is going to be sharing all 3 of her birth stories, which I was a part of all of them, so I probably could tell the stories myself. I don't even need you. Yeah, let me just go. I'll leave. But Roxanne had 2 hospital births and 1 freestanding birth center birth, and so you're going to get a little taste of what a hospital unmedicated birth is like, giving birth outside of the hospital setting, and how she managed to have 3 very empowering birth experiences. Usually I feel like the first birth is always a little bit negative for most folks. So they're trying to get their feet wet and figure it out. So I feel like it's more rare for somebody to have all positive birth experiences, which I feel should be the norm.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's
I do feel very fortunate whenever anybody's like telling birth stories, and I'm always like, yeah, I had like 3 really great experiences, and I almost feel like I'm like bragging in a way, like, oh, look at me, like I'm so amazing. But then I like feel guilty that I don't have trauma. Like, I'm sorry, I don't have trauma. But I do view my first experience with birth. Your birth story, I feel like, was like my first experience with birth that wasn't a patient. And I think that I, by being there and supporting you through the entire thing, like I definitely learned a lot from your birth to be able to influence my first pregnancy and birth. I think that played a really big part. So if you haven't listened to Gina's birth story, that would really be like part 1
like
of
Roxanne's
my birth stories.
Birth story.
Yeah.
So I experienced the trauma for the both of us. But you also had experience as a labor nurse and my birth, obviously. So your birth and pregnancy was not the very first time that you've gone through, which I think is also part of the norm.
Yes.
So how did you prepare for so you were a labor and delivery nurse already for like 2 years when you got pregnant with Lily, your first.
I had been a labor and delivery nurse for 4 years at this point.
So lots of experience.
And I think I had a very well-rounded experience where I had the hospital births, like all the births I supported were hospital inductions, C-sections, like the full gamut. But within the past 2 years, like after you had Adeline between them and like me getting pregnant, I did learn a lot and started learning a lot more about like unmedicated birth, physiologic birth. And I think that played a really big part on how I prepared for this pregnancy with Lily. So for my first, it was like 2018, got pregnant. My husband was deployed for the entire period. So I did have like a lot of free time, like more so than like I feel like some people would have during their first pregnancy. I had a lot of free time to do a lot of preparing and reading, and because I didn't have like other things that I didn't have to do date nights with my husband to like talk to him and like do all of these things with my husband. I just kind of did them by myself. Like we would FaceTime, like he was deployed and had internet. So I did a lot of that stuff, but I didn't have to like take care of other people other than myself, which was pretty nice, honestly, when I think back on how easy that pregnancy was. I did have like a lot of pelvic pain, but like otherwise I just had a lot of time to explore what I wanted for birth and kind of like build the team that I wanted. So I was really intentional that I wanted an unmedicated birth. And I kind of let that be known pretty early on in my pregnancy that this is something that I wanted to experience. And I wanted it to just like, one, it's like a learning experience so that I was better able to be like a labor and delivery nurse that understood a little bit more and was like a little bit more empathetic for people who did want to go through an unmedicated birth. Because I would be like, yeah, I know what that feels like. I'm here for you. Because like I had a couple experiences where like I didn't have kids before and I was taking care of someone in labor and they're like, do you have any kids? And I was like, no. And they're like, so you don't know what I'm experiencing right now. And I was like, well, shut down. I don't know. I do not know.
You
but
were-
I'm
you were
taking
accurate.
care of many, many people in your experience. So like I'd sound like I don't know how to help you.
I
But
think it is different,
I don't
though.
know what your experience. You are correct. I've never felt that in my body. And I think that it can really be beneficial for some people. So I wanted to know what labor was like. And then just obviously everyone wants to know, can I even do it? Like, can I do it? So I was very vocal my entire pregnancy that I wanted to have an unmedicated birth. And everyone was always like, are you sure? Like, what are you doing to prepare? Like, what are you doing to prepare for having an unmedicated birth? And like, because you can't just show up, Roxanne, and be like, yep, that's just what I'm going to do. You need to do stuff beforehand. And everyone was very like either supportive of being like, hey, this is what I did. And like other people were just like, okay, well, anesthesia's down the hall when you want them. And I think I also was very open to like, if I needed an epidural, like I wasn't going to be like, oh, okay, well, like I suck. Like I was very understanding that like, hey, epidurals are there and they're available to me. If I was going to get induced, I was like, yeah, I would probably like an epidural if I was going to be induced because that's going to be a long ass time, probably. So I think that I was not like very gung-ho, like unmedicated birth or bust. I was pretty open to if I needed interventions because I knew as a labor and delivery nurse that they're there and they're beneficial. But I picked a team because I worked with everybody. So I knew who I would want and who I jived with the most of who I wanted to be on my team. I had one midwife who she delivered at birth center and she wanted to like work at birth centers. So I knew I was like, she's like the jive that I want. She's the vibe that I'm wanting. And she was like, I will do all of your prenatal care. That's fine. So we would do it at work when I was working with her. She would do my prenatal visits. Like, I think I had to go to the clinic maybe once or twice because she was like just not working on labor and delivery for the times that I needed. But it was really easy. Like I didn't have to like come in on my day off or like worry about like scheduling stuff on my days off. I got to just like enjoy the 3 to 4 days a week that I was at home. And I got to just prepare and research all of the things that I wanted for birth. I really wanted to do hypnobirthing. I did learn about it when I was in like the Army School of Labor and Delivery Nursing. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And because my husband wasn't home at nighttime, I just played it on a Bluetooth speaker and I didn't have to worry about like wearing headphones or it being too loud for like someone else who's trying to fall asleep. So that was really nice. And I started implementing that pretty early on in my pregnancy. And then like as you progress, you like listen to it more often.
I found that to be like the challenging part with, because after you did hypnobirthing, I was like, I want to do hypnobirthing. But I couldn't figure out how to do it because I was like, well, I don't want to like meditate in the middle of the day while I'm supposed to be watching my children or child. And then for night, I was like, well, I can't just play it because everyone's
to wear
sleeping.
headphones.
But then if I wear headphones, I'm like, well, it's uncomfortable. Like so that was like that made it really challenging for me to do hypnobirthing because I could not find the time other than when I was going to bed, but that didn't feel accessible to me.
And so I think that the only reason I could really do it was because I was home alone at nighttime. And it also helped me because, I mean, if you're home alone, it's like single white female, like people can break into your home in the middle of the night. By listening to the hypno track, I didn't think about that or even worry about that because like that's what I focused on. But like it's always a fear of my husband's is whenever we're like home alone. He's like, someone's gonna break into our home. We live in like a neighborhood of like old people. Like no one's coming to my neighborhood anyway. But I felt it was so much more accessible because in subsequent pregnancies, I could not do that because I had a husband in the bed, kids in my bed. Like in the headphones, I was just not comfortable to sleep in. So it really worked out that he was gone because I was able to do the hypnobirthing really, really well. And I think it was really influential in my birth by being able to do the hypnobirthing. Well, and then we took a spinning babies course in the middle of my pregnancy for like practitioners. And I was like, this is perfect. Like, I'm pregnant. I'm going to utilize all of these things. But then I had no partner to do all of the...
It's hard to do some of the
You can't do I literally could only do inversions at home. So that was like one of the barriers of him being on. I couldn't really do any of the things that spinning baby is educated about other than a forward leading inversion because I didn't have a partner home to do that with. And Gina, like, she couldn't just come to my house every single night because she had a baby to do all of these things. Or I wasn't going to ask her to do all those things. So I was just like, whatever, like I'll do it every once in a while when I see her.
I will say that we did have to figure out how we can implement some of the protocols of spinning babies for people that were by themselves.
Yeah.
So now, with my better understanding of like pelvic mechanics and kind of like the goals of different positions, and we are able to develop movements to help you prepare your body for birth that you can do solo.
Because that's the one thing that's hard.
And we'll link one of the workout videos down below where we incorporate all those solo exercises as well. Because that is one of the challenging things is you have to have a partner that's readily available to then do all of these
and
movements.
then it takes like, some time to do it. Like, if you have other kids running around, it's a little bit harder to implement all of those things. And so that was like a challenge that we experienced in my pregnancy because I just didn't have my partner home to be able to do all of these things. He got home at 36 weeks pregnant. Like not him, I was 36 weeks pregnant. And we just kind of did a crash. We were pregnant. We did a crash course like on preparing for pregnancy because like he was busy, like defending our freedom. He didn't have time to like read a bunch of like pregnancy books while he was there. He was like focusing on missions. If he wanted to, he would. I know he did like do some stuff. Like if I sent him videos and stuff, he would watch it. But he was like, I don't have the like brain capacity to process all of like I need to just focus on this and then I'll remember you're pregnant.
Well, I think it's harder for them because like a lot of the stuff that we're learning during pregnancy we're implementing within our own body.
Yeah, and it's hard to conceptualize
if I'm learning like different movements, I am then practicing them in my own body. Well, for our partners, if they're not aiding us in that preparation, it's hard for them to visualize it and conceptualize it, I think.
Yeah. And I think he also understood when he came home, like he could do all of that when he was home because I wasn't going to have a baby at 36 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
As much as he feared it, I think he understood that 40 weeks was likely when it was going to happen. So he had time. He actually came back like 2 weeks early and he's like, that would be really nice if you just had your baby before my team came back because then I wouldn't be like, oh, I left you early to like, because my wife was pregnant. And then she didn't even have a baby, which, spoiler alert, happened.
Oh, that happened once with, I think it was like Owen's or Sophie's pregnancy. I can't remember. Baird like didn't do a field, like he didn't go on a work trip.
Oh, yeah. I remember
because
this.
I was pregnant and then everyone came back from the work trip and I was still pregnant.
Yeah. But like you don't know. Like you don't know. You don't know. So, I mean, I think he knew that we had a lot of things to like prepare. Like our house was not, I did not do any house prep because that's his thing. Like he prepped the house for a baby to be there. Like he like actually like cleaned out a room and a drawer for like all of her clothes and all of that. Like I just had it in a box. And I was like, this is your job when you come home. So he did. He prepared the house for
you
a
focus
baby.
on his strength.
Yeah, which was fine. So then when he came home, we did a prenatal like childbirth education course with Gina. At the time, it was 2 days, like 2 separate days at nighttime, so which it fit in his schedule really easily. And it was like a nice way for him to start like getting into like the childbirth prep. But he also knew like I had Gina. She was going to be my doula. And she would tell him what to do. And if he was doing something wrong, she would tell him he was doing it wrong. So he's like, I'm not super stressed about it because I know like if there's something that I should be doing, Gina will remind me to do it. Like if I needed to like give you food, like she'll tell me, hey, Roxanne should eat something. Or like, hey, give Roxanne some water. Like it's been a while. And he's like, so I knew that I have someone. So all of the pressure just went off of his shoulders and onto Gina's shoulders.
I'm always very relaxed.
Yeah.
Super calm person.
Super calm. I don't know what that type is, like type A, type B. I think it's type C. Super
type
chill. Like, yeah.
We'll just say type C for chill.
Chill.
Which we are
Gina's not. Gina, we are both type A. But he was pretty relaxed, but he still was very involved in like preparing. Like he would pack our bags, like make sure that we had like he had like his whole bag already packed. Like he was very involved in the car seat, so we were preparing in all that aspect for the 4 weeks prior to my labor. I was my entire labor, our pregnancy. I was like, I can't give birth until 40 weeks because the Army like has. I had calculated it out. I had to deliver by no earlier than 40 weeks because I was getting out of the Army and I had so much time like saved up. My sick leave, for lack of a better word, was saved up. And then the Army gives you 3 months maternity leave. So I was like, I have to deliver by this day or else I have to go back to work for a couple days, like in the hospital before starting my like transition out of the Army. But once 37 weeks hit, I was like, I can come back to work. You can come any second now, please. I'm so tired. But of course, she did not. She waited till 40 weeks. So I was due on a Wednesday, and Tuesday was my last day of work that week. And I was like, I will not be back on Friday. like, because we did shift work. So Friday I had to go back, and it was a long weekend, and it was Cinco de Mayo weekend. So I was like, I would just like to not do anything that weekend except have a baby. And I was like, I will not see any of you Friday unless it is to have a baby. And they're like, okay, Roxanne, we'll see you Friday. And I was like, no.
Well,
I'm
they saw you
serious.
Friday.
Yeah, they did. Spoiler, they did see me Friday. But I was like, I will not be here working Friday, guys. I'm just letting everyone know I will not be here Friday.
You got to put that out in the universe.
So Tuesday, they checked my cervix, I remember. And I was a whole like closed, maybe fingertip, like nothing happening. And I was like, can you strip my membranes? And they're like, even if we could, we would not, because labor and delivery had been full. Like they were busy. Like every bed was full. Every bed in triage was full. Like there was not a bed, even if I was in labor at
The
that
hallway
point.
is available for you.
And they were joking that we had like postpartum was so busy. And that's another reason we were so busy, because we had to hold on to like postpartum patients who had already delivered because they couldn't go to postpartum. So they had joked at one point, they're like, we're just going to birth center it up, Roxanne. You're going to have your baby. We're going to just discharge you home after 6 hours because we know you will come back. And I was like, I'm fine with that. Like, you can do that for me. I'd be okay. I would like my new parent meal and then I'll go home. But they did have a bet for me, so it was fine. So when this was Tuesday, Wednesday I woke up, was my due date. Nothing happened. And I was like,
The disappointment.
the disappointment I felt. And I was like, I think actually I had like a little mental breakdown that evening, because I was like, I think we tried to do the sideline release because my husband was home, but I had super bad SPD pain, like symphysis pubis pain. I started crying during it because it hurt so bad. Like doing those closed leg movements just did not feel good. And I was like, if I can't even handle this, how am I going to handle labor? Like there's no, like this can't be like worse than labor. Spoiler alert, it is worse than labor because it's just constant pain while you're in that position. But I
Before
spiraled.
we dive into your story, though, because someone who's listening that has pelvic pain is going to get really nervous. Did you notice the pelvic pain during your actual labor?
No, I didn't notice it during labor. And it was only, I was inside lying release with the bad pubic pain. That position was super uncomfortable. So just don't do side lying release if you have really bad symphysis pubic pain. That's what caused me to mentally spiral, because I was like, normally it's not bad, but like that made it so terrible, that position, when I had the really bad pubic pain. And I'd never noticed it during labor. I didn't notice my pubic pain at any point.
Because we get that question a
during
lot
labor.
where someone's like, I have a lot of pelvic pain. What do I do during labor? And I'm like, most folks don't even notice
But I
it.
also did not choose positions that would be like
intuitively.
that. Like I intuitively didn't choose any closed knee positions during my labor because that would hurt. Like I didn't lunge at all with her labor because that would intuitively would have
And I don't think you
caused me
need
more
to.
pain. And then you don't need to lunge. So
Okay,
like
sorry.
the things that I did during her labor like did not irritate my SPD. But Wednesday night, I did sideline release, cried hysterically because I was like, if I can't even do this, like how am I going to handle labor? I like texted Gina, I texted my friend, and they're like, it's not the same. You're going to be fine. You're strong. You just need to take a breath. And so my one friend's like, take a bath, get in the bath. Cause she knew I liked baths. Like if you don't like baths, don't take a bath, take a shower or whatever, however you would relax. But I was like, I will take a bath cause it'll be relaxing. I did a little bit of nipple stimulation in the bathtub, listened to my hypnobirthing track, and just like chill the F out. And then I woke up the next morning, and then I went to bed, obviously. And then I woke up at 2 a.m. having contractions. So I just needed to chill.
Sometimes you just need a good cry.
Yeah, also like a really good cry. But I woke up, it was like 2 a.m., started noticing that I was like, oh, these are contractions. So of course, what did I do? Labor and delivery nurse. I got up immediately, started moving around my house. I was like, yes, labor is starting. Got on the top, listened to my hypnobirthing tracks. I was texting my dad because he was on night shift. I was like, I'm contracting. He's like, cool. Thumbs up. But then he did ask, he's like, do you want me to send your mom over? And I was like, no, I don't think I need her yet. And I think by like 7 a.m. she like came over and like fed me. And again, labor contractions were still far apart, able to talk through them. My friend was like, you are in early labor.
Go take a nap.
Go take a nap. Take some Tylenol, Benadryl, and go to sleep. And I was like, fine. So I told my husband, I was like, I am contracting. I think you're probably fine to go to work, but just in case, maybe you can stay home if you can. They were doing nothing because like they were still recovering from their deployment. So he's like, I'll just stay home. It's fine. So we both, I think he also went back to sleep. So we went back to sleep and I woke up at like 2, I don't know, in the afternoon sometime. Gina brought us lunch. We ate Panera bread and then we're like, let's go for a walk. So we walked around the neighborhood for a little bit. They started to pick up a little bit more, but it wasn't really until like dinner time. We were cooking dinner that they started picking up to the point that I needed more support. So this is when my husband started doing hip squeezes and I was able to kind of distract myself in between with like prepping dinner. So again, evening time, my dog came in through the doggy door and we're prepping dinner. I'm needing some support during contractions. I feel like they might have been like 2 to 5 minutes at this point. And she comes pushes up against my leg. And I look at her. I was like, what's wrong? Like, what are you doing, girl? Like, she's a snuggly dog. But I was like, this is a bit much. And then she starts having a full-blown seizure in my kitchen. And my contractions immediately stop. They were on a good pattern and they stopped because I'm like, my dog is going to die. I'm going to have to.
You're like, oh, she knows I'm in labor and is bonding with me.
No. Seizure.
She knew she was going to have a seizure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
She has like an aura. And like this was like consistent with like a whole seizure journey. She no longer has seizures, but anytime she was about to have a seizure, she would come find us. And one time, this is a side note, one time she was having a seizure and we had closed the doggy door because they were washing our floors. And she was trying to get in and then had a seizure on the deck. And I felt the worst about that one out of all of them. Because I was like, she was trying to get to us and she couldn't. And I like, I boo-hooed so hard. I cried so hard about that one as I like petted her until she was done. I was like, I'm so sorry I left you. I abandoned you for your seizure. But normally she like would come and find us before. So she had that aura. But this was her first one ever during my labor. And so my contractions stop. My husband's calling the emergency vet. I'm like thinking my dog's going to die. I'm going to have to name my baby after my dog, which her name is Nymeria. That'd be a very odd name for a human. And she was fine. She stopped seizing, got up, drank some water, and like carried on about the rest of the day. And I was like,
nothing happened.
And I was like, are you kidding me? The vet was like, just continue to monitor her. So we tell my dad, like, hey, can you watch her like throughout the night? But no one told him that she had a seizure. So he's like, cool, obviously I need to know. I need to watch your dog. You're about to go have a baby. Duh. And he never like actually checked on her till the next morning. But it's fine. She was fine. So after we recovered, not just my dog recovered, but also me physically and mentally recovered from my dog seizing, my contractions did pick back up. So they started back slowly and then picked back up. And we kind of switched like going in the shower to like just laboring in the living room. And I think it got to the point that it was like 1, 2 a.m. at this point, 24 hours of on and off contractions. And my husband was like, I'm going to get a little bit sleepy here soon. So like, if we want to go to the hospital, can we go now? Or like, I'm going to be very sleepy in the morning. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely like 6 centimeters. So like, we should definitely go to the hospital for sure. Really in labor, like for sure agree with this decision. I was very clearly still in early labor, but had convinced myself I was further along. But surely
you arrived and you were 6 centimeters.
Yeah, surely. Because I am a labor and delivery nurse. I have been doing this for 4 years. I obviously know I would not show up at 0 centimeters. So we got to the hospital, checked in, got to triage. Like Gina had called our photographer. We saw Gina's doula in the hallway, and she was just like, "Oh yeah, clearly in labor, clearly 6 centimeters." I got into triage. They checked me, and my lovely midwife goes, "Oh, honey, you are 1 centimeter, but you're 100% of face." So she like threw that like positive at the end, and I was like, okay, still devastated. And so she's known as like she strips people's membranes willingly with consent, and they come back in 4 to 6 hours, like complete, ready to have a baby. So she goes, do you want me to strip your membranes? And I was like, yes, I do, please. So just from stripping my membranes, I went from 1 centimeters, because I was 100% of face, 1 centimeter to 3 centimeters very quickly. And I was like, great, I feel less defeated. Now I'm 3 centimeters, but I still have 7 more to go. So she's like, come back if like they pick up. So we walked around the hospital for a little bit. They told me to eat some food. I grabbed like a little bit of snack out of the potluck that they had that evening and immediately threw it up. I was like, this is not what I needed. I'm going to throw up. I ran to the bathroom and then threw up and peed myself. And I was like, great. doing real well today.
Not only are you 1 centimeter, you also now peed yourself.
Yeah. So I was like, great. So we went outside. I think we did a little bit of curb walking, even though I was like -2 station. I don't know why I even attempted. You did some like hip lifts.
Just trying to throw everything out there.
I was just like hip lifts, like do it all the way to the car because I was like, oh, I peed, so I need new pants. And then we got to the car and I was like, I don't want to go back in. I just want to take a nap. I just really want to take a nap. I'm just freaking tired, y'all. I just want to go to bed. So everybody, we all got into the car. I couldn't lay down, so I was just sitting in the front like passenger seat. I think I listened to my hypnobirthing tracks at this point because everyone else was asleep and had my TENS unit on, just resting. I say resting because I did not sleep. Like Gina and Patrick were like full on asleep. And I definitely fell asleep because I remember having like some like vivid dreams, but in between contractions, I was like probably fell into sleep and then woke up during the contraction, was able to kind of just breathe through them, move my hips, and then was able to fall asleep. And we probably did that for like a couple hours. I don't know, a couple hours. It was like 6:30. We woke up and decided we probably should not just continue sleeping in this parking lot because this is now Friday. I also like panicked, texted my boss like, hey, I'm in early labor. I will not be at work today. Like, please say it's okay. Because in the Army, you can't just not go to work and be like, oh, I'm sick. You have to like get a note and like be excused from duty. And since I was supposed to be at work the day, technically I should have got a note. And I was like, can my triage visit at 3 a.m. count as my note, please? And she's like, yes, it's fine. Like, let me know when you're coming in for labor. And I was like, thank you very much. Because I will not be helpful in labor.
No.
To help other people in labor. So,
well, it could be a bonding experience.
I know,
first.
right? Like, oh, me too. Let's breathe together. So 6:30.
Do you think your contractions would sync?
That would be funny. But so it was like 6:30. We have to go get my mom, who's inside, because we were deciding like, well, should we go to triage or should we go home? So I was like, well, then maybe we can just get checked. So we're on our way inside to grab our mom, who is in the waiting area of the hospital, like labor and delivery, where like motion sensor lights, anytime you walk by the room, not just in the room, but by the room, the lights would turn on. So she's sleeping in this room, just the lights are like coming on and off underneath her blanket. So, but on our way there, we're like in like the hallway to labor and delivery. Gina's doula is there and she goes, oh, how you doing? And I was like, oh, it's kind of about the same. And so she looks at me and she goes, they're full. Like every bed is full and triage is full. Just go home. And I was like, I just almost needed that permission to just go home. So I was like, okay, I guess we'll go home. So we grab our mom and just head home. By the time I got home, it was like 7:30, 7:40-ish. And I was like, I'm going to take a nap. Like yesterday, I took Tylenol and Benadryl. My contractions slowed down and I got to take a bomb nap. I'm going to do the same thing. Gina went home to our parents' house to like sleep with her daughter because she had been away from her. She didn't bring Adeline to the hospital.
I did not.
So she went to sleep with her daughter for a little bit before she had to go to the gym because there was a class at the gym in the morning that she had opened up the gym for. And I was like, labor's not doing anything, so it's fine. Like nothing's happening over here.
I'm just going to take a nap.
Yeah, so I took the Tylenol and Benadryl, got into the bathtub because I did really want to take a bath. So I was in my head like, the contractions are just going to peter away and I'm going to fall asleep in the bathtub. They did not. Spoiler alert. They did not. They just kept getting closer and closer together and stronger and stronger.
It was
and
like your labor was progressing.
I know. It's almost like labor was happening and I was upset about it. I was super mad. I was like, why isn't this helping? Like the bath is supposed to help, like relax you. And every time it would come, I would just be like upset. Like you were not supposed to come. You were supposed to go away. And so Gina comes in on her way to the gym just to check in on me. And I was just like, this bathtub's not working. It's not helping. And you're like, well, maybe let's get out. I was like, oh, it's a wonderful idea. Like, I would never thought of that. That's why she gets paid for this. So we got out of the tub and she like got me set up in the bed. It was like all nice and pillows everywhere because she knew about my pubic pain. So she put pillows everywhere to like help support me. And my husband came and like laid next to me and she's like, you good? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. But I think she might be too big and cried about it. And Gina's like, she's not too big. You're doing great. But I'll be right back. It was longer than that. But like basically I cried that she wasn't going to fit. And then Gina's like, she will fit. You're doing great. It just takes a long time sometimes. And so then she went to the gym, and then me and my husband were just laying in the bed. The first contraction hit, and I was like, where is this TENS unit? Please go get the TENS unit. And like hitting him to go get it. He runs, grabs it, puts it on. And then the next contraction, I think I was good for that one. And then the third one, I was like, absolutely not. I can no longer lay in this bed. Like laying down is the absolute worst. So I went and sat on the toilet. While I was sitting on the toilet, obviously I'm a nurse. So I was like, I'm going to check my cervix. No idea what I'm feeling for. I know it's more than 3. That's all I got. Looking back, I was like 5 to 6 centimeters at this point. I could feel my bag, but like it was still higher up. And I was like, okay, well, at least I'm not 3, but it's not time to go to the hospital. It's not time to have a baby. And like, it's going to be a while. So then I'm like spiraling. So just wandering my house, walking in circles, sitting on the toilet, not sitting, because I'm not going to sit on the couch and I'm not going to lay on that bed again, because that was the terrible, terrible position. Still have the TENS unit on this whole time though. Patrick is like, should we go to the hospital? I was like, no. I was like, I feel this pressure in my butt, but like, it's not like I need to poop. So like, no, like it's not time yet. He calls Gina and he's like, you need to come right now. You need to go. I don't know what I'm doing. You're supposed to be here.
This is why I hired you.
So then I'm still just like wandering the house. Gina comes, and when she comes, I'm like sitting on the toilet, and she's like, how you doing? And I'm like, I don't know.
Not good, my man. Not good.
I don't know what's happening. I was like, I feel like something's in my vagina. She like looks down. She like sees something, and it's like my bulging bag of amniotic sac is like coming out. And I was like, I don't know what it is. And she was like, do you think it's your amniotic sac? And I was like, I don't freaking know. I don't know. In hindsight, I touched it and it was very clearly amniotic sac. I knew it was an amniotic sac, but I could not process that thought in the moment, because I was like, a lot of things are happening to my body and I don't know what's happening. So she was like, oh, I have an amni hook. Do you want that? Like, and I was like, no, I do not want that.
What is the worst idea that Gina's ever had in her life? Roxanne,
I'll
break your
never
water
let
at
her
home.
live it down.
That was a horrible idea. I had only been a doula for like a few months at this point. And I was like, maybe
had
that'll
one of
help
those.
relieve the pressure. I don't know.
I mean, it would have, but it also would have like expedited birth. But it's fine. I was like, no, I do not want that. I don't know what's happening. And so then I got up and I'm like wandering the house again. And Gina's like, I think we need to go to the hospital. And I was like, no, like I feel pressure in my butt, but it's not like I have to poop. Like it's not time. It's like that.
So we throw
not
Roxanne in
time.
the car.
So Gina and my husband are preparing the car as I'm like like spiraling, literally walking in circles in my front yard, thinking about like, I don't want to get back in that car, because that was the worst. Like 45 minutes in that car right now, that's a terrible idea. I'll just have this baby right here on this front lawn and then I'll get in the car. That's a good idea. And then Gina and Patrick just throw me in the vehicle and we start on our way. Probably like 5 or 10 minutes into the drive, I start like uncontrollably pushing. And Gina's like,
Don't do that.
Are you bearing down? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I do not know what's happening to my body at this point. I don't know. And Gina's like, let's just breathe. Let's breathe through
Let's
these.
take
like,
a
just
deep
take
breath.
some deep breaths through these contractions. Because I'm like holding my breath, bearing down uncontrollably. And she's like, let's exhale instead. Exhale, do not bear down uncontrollably. So then Gina's also texting the girl that I was supposed to work with in triage that day, like, hey, we are bearing down on our way to the hospital now. Please help us.
See you soon.
See you soon. And so I read those text messages every once in a while, because they crack me up. We also were delivering on the military hospital, so we had to go through a gate. And all I kept thinking about was like, when we get to the gate, they do random inspections because they don't want you bringing like unauthorized things onto the base. Totally understandable. I know why they do it. But in the moment, I was like, they're going to have to inspect this vehicle and I'm going to have the baby at the gate. They're going to, that little specialist.
They would have just let you go.
That little specialist was going to have to catch my baby. The military police officer is going to catch my baby because I'm in labor. I don't know why. That was all I thought about. And then once we got to the gate, we literally just walked, we sped through. They checked our IDs and let us go. And I was like, okay, one less thing that I have to worry about. But we get to the hospital. Gina runs inside, grabs a wheelchair. And I was like, no, please take that away. And you're like, get in the wheelchair. It's for speed. I know you could walk, but get in this wheelchair.
I just want to emphasize that you're telling the story like we were all incredibly panicked. We were.
We were very
we were,
panicked.
in fact, very panicked. It was this
I was running.
No, very panicked.
This is not an exaggeration.
I was like still in the zone, but like I still remember the panic because I was like, I also don't want to have a car baby. Like they would.
I'm not trained for this.
Like no one in this vehicle is trained for this. My husband also would have been like, please, like this car would be forever unclean. Do not have a baby in it. But wheelchair, Gina's like, get in the wheelchair right now. And I was like, no, I can walk. I'm fully capable. I'm a strong, independent woman. And you're like, get in the wheelchair. So I'm like, get in the wheelchair. My husband speeds me to labor and delivery. Gina goes and parks the car and also grab our mom, who was also speeding to the hospital behind us. And we get to the elevator and I have a contraction. I have to stand up, like not making it to I cannot sit in this wheelchair for any longer. As soon as we get to the third floor and the doors open, he just like puts me back in the wheelchair to speed me to labor and delivery. When we get into labor and delivery, I was a very typical like lady who's about to have her baby. One butt cheek is like not on the wheelchair. And if you ever see anybody in a wheelchair that's about to have a baby, they cannot sit on it like a normal person with like both butt cheeks down. One is off. And that was me. I was like lifting a leg up into triage. So they saw me do that and they're like, okay, Roxanne's probably gonna have a baby. And then I also jump out of the wheelchair as soon as Patrick stops at the front desk and just walk to triage because I know where I'm going. And I was like, I just had a contraction there. I know one is coming. So like I need to quickly get somewhere not in this wheelchair. So walk into triage. I know where I'm going. I work there. I work with all of these people. And they're like, okay, well, you know where you're going, Roxanne. My husband's just like following behind. I get into the bed. I see the nurse that I was supposed to work with. And I was like, if I'm 5 centimeters, I'm going to be very mad. And she goes, I can guarantee you're not.
I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to be mad.
You are not 5 centimeters. And I was like, I'm holding you to this. So they helped me get into the bed. The midwife comes in with the consent forms, like clearly knows that I'm being admitted at this point, even if I'm not completely dilated. They check my cervix and I have a bulgy bag of water, completely dilated. And they're like, yeah, do you want your midwife or do you want me to be your midwife? And I was like, if she's available, I would love it. As I'm like contracting, I was like, if she's not busy, I would love if she could come.
Not to be an inconvenience.
I don't want to inconvenience her. Like, but if she's busy, it's okay. They're like, she rescheduled all of her clients. It's also lunchtime, so like she will be here. And I was like, thank you. I appreciate her and all she does for me. And then I immediately have a contraction in my amniotic sac. Ruptures all over the bed, meconium. I did spiral a little bit about the meconium. Even though I know it's fine, but like in the moment I was like, oh no. And then they're like, you can't walk to your labor room any longer. The room was also just cleaned. So then they just wheel me there to the labor room with my butt in the air and puppy pose, the sheet over my butt. And they're like, we're just going. And Patrick just texts Gina, she's there.
When I was like, where? What does that mean?
She's completely
it's
there.
So cryptic.
Gina's like, what is that? Like, she's completely dilated.
Like she had a baby.
10 centimeters. Like,
she's in a room. Like, what?
I also read those text messages and they crack me up sometimes. So we get into the room and like Gina and my mom and our photographer got there at the same exact time. So they let them into our room. Like,
so
all of us
before
enter.
we move on to this, he texted me and I was not like in the waiting room. Like mom and I were just like kind of not casually, like we were walking into the hospital. He's like, she's there. And I'm like, where? And the labor and delivery is on the 3rd floor. So mom and I are like sprinting through the hospital thinking like your baby's falling out of your body right now. We grabbed the photographer along our like adventure. And like, so all of this is happening in a very condensed time frame.
Yeah, it's like minutes. A lot is happening in like short minutes. Like we arrive at the hospital, it's probably like 10:30 and like get admitted into the hospital at like 10:35. So like all of that happened in like 5 minutes. Like we are literally running. Get into the labor room and then my contractions.
Like you telling the story is longer than what the time that actually transpired.
And then we literally get into the room, but my water had just broke before they brought me in. And so like the pressure had decreased that I was experiencing. So my pushing wasn't as strong or like I didn't feel that as strong of an urge to push. So we got into the bed. People were able to talk to me a little bit more. But then I got to the toilet. Like my midwife was like, yeah, you can go push on the toilet for a couple times. And that did help increase the pressure. I still had the urge, but she didn't feel as low anymore because the amniotic sac was creating a lot of that pressure. So we pushed on the toilet for a couple times, and then we moved back to the bed. She checked me, and she did feel a lip, which is like a little bit of the cervix was still present. And she's like, that honestly could be like holding her head in. So she's like, I can just push it back, and then she likely will come lower. But she's like, but that won't feel very nice. So I was like, do whatever you got to do. This baby needs to come out like right now. So she held it for the next maybe 1 or 2 contractions, and that didn't feel great. But she was able to get past the lip. And then, I mean, it did, the next like 30 minutes felt probably long. It was probably less than 30 minutes. But the next couple minutes felt like years because it felt like she was crowning for 90 years. Like every push, it was just like 1 centimeter more of her head came out. And they're like, clear, like very next push, she's definitely going to be born. There's no more of her head left in your body. Like there's no way. No, it was like another contraction and another contraction. I was like, you guys are all lying. Like, you said this like 4 contractions ago that she was coming and her head is still there. I'm going to be the person that has half a baby's head just sticking out of me forever. And now I remember looking down too, and it was like this much of her head I felt like was like sticking out of me. And I was like, just get out. Just get out already. Just pull her out. But maybe it was like 1 or 2 more pushes. And then she finally emerged from my body, all 8 pounds of her chunky self. And they put her on my belly, and I was like, whoa, that is a lot of baby, first. And then 2, looked at her little cheeks. And I was like, that's why you didn't want to come out. Her cheeks were holding her in my body. That's why her head took so long, because her little cheeks were probably like, no. But I did, like, she came out, and because she had the meconium, like, I was obviously very excited she was there, but I was also really worried about her breathing. And so they very nicely, like, just called the respiratory therapist from the NICU to come look at her, and he looked at her. They brought her over to the warmer because she was breathing a little bit faster, which is all completely normal. Like, I know all of these things, and if I was the nurse, I would have been able to, like, calm myself down as a patient. But in the moment, I was very much still, all the stress hormones were still rushing through my body. And so I was very thankful that, like, respiratory therapist, he was very nice. It was like, oh yeah, I'll check her out. She's likely fine. But if it would make you feel better, he was very nice about it. And we got some cute photos of Patrick and Lily at the warmer. So I like looking at them. So I appreciate it. But the midwife, she like stitched me back up beautifully. I got to hold my baby, and then everyone that I wanted to be there was there. And it was also very limited people in the room at birth. So like NICU had to be there at the birth technically because I had meconium, but they all thankfully like stayed like kind of out of the room or like stayed away from me where I didn't notice that they were there. So it was just like my nurse. I mean, it's still a little bit of a party because we had a photographer, my mom, Gina, and my dad. Not my dad. Lily's dad, my husband, and then the midwife.
Who are the same person? Lily's dad
and my husband are the same person. I said dad as in like my child's dad. So there's still quite a few people, but it was like all people that I really kind of chose and wanted to be there. And like the minimum amount of people that had to be there was there. And I felt very supported. And I felt, I remember when she first came out and I was just like, I did that. Like, I remember like thinking contractions were going to be the worst thing in the world. Like, I was so worried. Like, I couldn't even do sideline release without having any sort of pain. And I did it. And like, the worst thing that I remember was being so freaking tired. Like, I just wanted to take a nap. And the contractions just kept happening. But it wasn't the pain that bothered me throughout the entire labor. It was the fact that I couldn't sleep. And I was just really, really sleepy. I wanted to nap. Like, literally, and even still to this day, I just think about how, man, if I would have just got a nap, how much better would I have felt throughout that entire thing? So I felt like I felt very strong and so powerful. And I think that it really did have a huge impact on like my parenting journey, that I felt pretty confident in a lot. Like, I mean, it's still first time parent. I feel like it kind of carried over that I was capable and I could make decisions like with help. But I could do this. Having the team that I did had a big impact on how I felt, not just during pregnancy and birth, but also like into postpartum, into future births. By my first midwife, coming in on her lunch break to like be there for me, I think it really made a really big impact for me as well.
I think a big difference between like your birth and my first birth, because they're really similar in timeline and kind of like the type of labor that transpired, was the difference in the level of support. Because obviously, like, we're both capable of giving birth without an epidural. Like, I demonstrated that with my next 3 births. And obviously, like, you wanted to give birth unmedicated without any epidural, and you did it, which was amazing. But it wasn't because, like, I was weaker that I got an epidural. I think the biggest difference was you didn't have that additional point of conflict with a provider. Like, the only conflict that you were having was, like, an internal, like, I really want to sleep, like, this is longer than I thought it was going to be. But you didn't have that external conflict, which I think really helped you feel confident and cope better with your contractions than I could during my first birth. So I guess I'm just trying to clarify for folks that are listening that are like, oh, well, I didn't give birth without an epidural. Like, am I not as strong? Like, I don't think it's about strength.
No, I think
support played a huge role.
Yeah. And I think it's also like I worked at the hospital. So like literally every single person knew what I wanted for my birth and who I was as a person. Like they knew me more on a personal level. So like every midwife, like had I come in that first time and like they told me to come back in a couple hours, and if I hadn't worked there, I probably would have like came back in a couple hours and been like, okay, like now what? What do I do? But like I had the support. I knew these people. So I like, had a little bit of the knowledge that no, I didn't need to go back if I didn't feel that it was the right choice. So I think that like the education and then the support that I had made a really big difference. And then like even just like your doula telling me like, hey, you can go home. Like you don't have to stay. Was also like a really nice permission, because that was the difference. Like you didn't go home and then I did go home, and that was also a really big difference between our births. So now we know like to go home.
So your next 2 births, so you did not work at the birth center.
I did not work at
the hospital that you gave
so
birth
they
at.
were
So some folks might be thinking like, well, the only way I can have a good experience is if I work there. Well, that's not the case. So let's get into your next 2 births.
Next 2 births. So after our first, we knew we wanted at least one more. So with our next pregnancy, we wanted to wait 2 years between pregnancies. And I had just finished like all of my prolapse recovery with my pelvic floor PT. And I was finally back to feeling like myself. But we were not using any contraception methods. So we got pregnant a little bit sooner than we had anticipated. And that definitely took some time to process. We were still very excited. Like we obviously wanted another baby. It was just a lot sooner than we had anticipated, like almost a year sooner than we had anticipated. So I definitely went through like a period where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have 2 kids. I'm not ready. I can barely take care of one. I'm not ready. And then at 12 weeks, I had bleeding, like very heavy bleeding. Like we were on our way to swim lessons and I had very, very heavy bleeding. And I was like, well, I brought this on to myself because I was saying I wasn't ready. And now the universe was like, well, we listened. You said you weren't ready. We're going to listen to you. And I was like, I take it back. I take it back.
That's not what I meant.
That's not what I meant. I had 9 months to prepare. I was kidding. And I'm like, I was so upset. And then we get to the hospital, the radiologist like looks at it, but they can't tell you anything. They're not allowed to tell you anything because they're not a doctor. They don't really know what they're seeing, quote unquote. But at the lady, I'm like sobbing uncontrollably on the table as she like wraps me with a warm blanket. And she just goes, I can't tell you what I saw because I'm not a doctor, but baby has a heartbeat. And I was like, thank you. That's all I needed. And then she sends me on my way. So then the ER doctor doesn't even tell me that my baby has a heartbeat. He's just like, well, you have a subchorionic hemorrhage and this is what it is. And this is what you have to do. And I'm like, so was my baby okay? And he's like, oh yeah, your baby's fine. I'm like,
could have started with that.
This could have started with that. Like, had I not known, like, if the lady told me I had my baby on heartbeat, you could have like thrown
they must
that in
experience like they must have experience with people having miscarriages.
You would think, but
like, because you don't go to labor and delivery if you're before 20 weeks. If there's something wrong,
everybody that has a miscarriage or pregnancy loss before 20 weeks goes to the ER.
Like, surely,
anyways, that's a whole episode there of itself, but. After that, I had a really large subchorionic hemorrhage. They're like, don't exercise, like don't lift anything heavy, just like monitor your bleeding. And then the bleeding like took like a couple weeks to kind of resolve. So by 20 weeks, though, the subchorionic hemorrhage had been gone. And that was one thing that I was worried about because we were moving in the middle of my, like at the end of my pregnancy at like 32 weeks, we were moving across the country to California. And I was like, well, I can't, move across the country if I'm potentially going to have like an early like pregnancy, like early labor, or like if anything's wrong, like with his like growing. Because with a subchorionic hemorrhage, things that could happen if it doesn't resolve by 20 weeks is it could affect baby's growth. So like they could be small, like way smaller than they're supposed to be. It could also lead to like chronic placental abruptions that could increase the likelihood that I would need an emergency C-section if the placenta started to fully separate from my uterine wall. It could like increase my bleeding risks that I could have throughout pregnancy. And so like there are risk factors associated with it if it did not resolve by 20 weeks. Also, I could not deliver at a freestanding birth center because that's a higher risk pregnancy. And I really wanted to do that because it had always been something that I wanted to do. But in North Carolina, like where we were living, one, I didn't even know that there was a birth center, but also was an hour and a half away. Like I would have made it, but I wasn't trying to drive an hour and a half for a birth center. And there, it was only 5 minutes down the road from the house we were renting. So it was like perfect. It like all the stars aligned to have this freestanding birth center birth that I really wanted to do. And I knew I could have an unmedicated birth because I had it previously. So like I knew my body could do it. I just wanted to set up a different environment this time.
It also isn't a prerequisite though. Like
it's not a prerequisite, but it was like something that like when I was planning this, I was like, I know I can do it. So like I don't need to deliver at the hospital. And the hospital there, like not everybody loved their experience. So I was like, well, maybe I would like to have a different hospital experience this time. And the birth center, 5 minutes down the road, all of the midwives there have been really, really awesome every time I've talked to them. So I was like, this kind of like stars have aligned for like me personally to deliver there. But like the subchorionic hemorrhage had to like have been resolved and things be okay. So we had a growth ultrasound before we started our drive to California. And one, they saw hair on the ultrasound, which like so cute. But two, his growth was fine. So everything kind of like lined up well. I started reaching out to the birth center like pretty early on as soon as we knew we were going to deliver in California. And I had a bunch of like virtual visits with them to kind of help start building that relationship. Because that is the one thing about community birth is like you build this relationship with the providers a lot closer than you are able to in 15-minute visits with your OBs and midwives and hospitals and like clinics because they just don't have the time to like have 30 minutes to hour-long visits with you for prenatal because they have like a higher volume of patients. But at the birth center, they have less patients, so you can get those hour-long visits easier. So I was able to build a relationship with them before we even got there. And then once we got there, like actually seeing the birth center was like so nice. And it was really nice for my husband to kind of see where we were delivering, how to get there, and got to meet them as well. Once we were settled in, we kind of got settled in pretty quickly because we kind of had to. And Gina and my mom flew out to California at 38 weeks when I was 38 weeks. And not that we were worried, but I did not have my baby before then. When we were there, though, her husband was conveniently also on like leave. So he was able to come out to California to spend time with us out in California. And they were like, well, if Roxanne has her baby, we can go to Disneyland because it was only like a 5-hour drive. And then I never had my baby for a while. So I was like 39-ish weeks. And they're like, how you feeling? And they're like, we're thinking of going to Disney.
I know you're trying to have a baby.
We know you're trying to have a baby. We can take Lily with us, though. So Lily, my oldest, we're like, that we can take her with us to Disneyland. We had hoped she would have your baby and we would just take her after, but that's not happening. So I was like, yeah, it's fine. So
he also was leaving soon, and so it was kind of like our last.
This was supposed to be like the last time. Like he wasn't going to be able to stay any longer. So it was like, okay, that's fine. They went to Disney. It was like 2 days maybe. They went to Disneyland, and my mom got to relax for 2 days without any kids. And my husband and I got to just spend time with just me and him, which was also really nice. Like we went to my prenatal appointment, just like went to the beach, like walked around, got to relax and kind of prepare for having 2 small children. And that was honestly really nice. So then they got back from Disneyland. My brother-in-law loves cooking. Gina's husband loves to cook. So him and my mom made like a huge meal with like meat and steak and so much food. So I ate a very, very delicious meal. And then as we were sitting at the table at the end, I was like, my back's kind of hurting. Huh. And with my first, I had a lot of back labor, which was why the TENS unit was so great. So with this one, it was like tingling in my lower back, which I had been feeling on and off for like a few days at this point. So I was like, well, told no one, but I was like, I think I should go to bed just in case. Again, told nobody though. No, didn't tell my husband, didn't tell Gina. I was just like, I'm going to go to bed. So me and my daughter, we went and lay down in bed because she slept in bed with us because they were in her bed. Everyone was sleeping in her bed. So I put the TENS unit on and went to sleep. Woke up probably like around 3 and was like, okay, these contractions are a little bit closer. Like they're actual contractions now, but still pretty far apart. And I was like, I'm dehydrated. This isn't labor. I'm dehydrated because I was like 39 and 5 at this point. Technically was like my original due date, but they had changed the date. So I was 39 and 5 on paper. I went in, drank some coconut water, drank some water. I was like, I'm dehydrated. Never stopped. So then at 4, I like woke my husband up because I was like, I need some hip squeezes with these contractions. So he's giving me some hip squeezes. I texted Gina. Gina woke up at around 5 and was like, hey, how you doing? I was like, yep, still laboring. But I'd felt them lower in my belly, which I never felt with Lily, but it was like a lot more cramping in my lower belly with my back. And I was like, I don't know, this feels weird. And then they're like, should we think about going to the hospital like during this? And this is like a long period of time. Like, should we go to the hospital? And I was like, or the birth center. No, like it's too early. Like I knew like my last one was like 36 hours. Like it's been like 2 hours, guys. Like definitely fine. And so we like labored there for a little bit. Gina took some pictures. And then my husband's like, well, I texted like the midwife on call and she's going to give me a call here in a little bit. And I think maybe like 10 minutes later, Gina's like, we could just go and you can just enjoy the room. She's like, it's a really nice room and the tub is really nice. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds nice.
It's also more spacious than your
I was like, yeah, my
house with,
bedroom
like,
was
15 people in
there was
it.
a lot of people in our small little like 1,300 square foot home. And so I was like, yeah, maybe that would be nice to go. And then it was like 2 contractions later. I was like vocalizing with contractions. And the midwife was like, hey, does she want to come in? And she hears me in the background. She goes, okay, we'll meet you at the first center. Which I don't really vocalize with. It was just those 2. Like I was like, okay, that was odd. And so then we started getting everything ready to like meet them at the birth center. By the time we got there, I think it was like 7:30. And I was probably just hitting active labor, I feel like, because I was still able to like communicate, or maybe it was just the drive there like brought me out of it a little bit. But once we got there, I jumped in the tub as soon as I possibly could because I was like, this is one of the biggest reasons we wanted to deliver here. This tub is the reason. And I got into the tub and it felt so nice, so nice. But we labored there, like in the tub, in the shower, like all around the room for like 3 hours. And then Gina at 3 hours was like, so you gonna start pushing? Because usually like that's like been the trend, like 3 hours of active labor and then we start pushing. And so she asked that like jokingly, like, okay, Roxanne, it's been like 3 hours. When are you gonna start pushing? And then it was like the next contraction, I started bearing down a little bit.
I was like, oh,
And I was
okay.
like, Gina's like, oh, I'm a magician. Okay. And I was like, okay.
Because it had happened in like a few births where I had made like a joke, like, all right, anytime you're ready. And then like the next contraction, I was like, okay. So yeah.
So it worked again.
I was like, well, 3 hours is when we all start pushing. That's how long our active labors are. Let's go.
And I started bearing down. And it wasn't like it was definitely still the early portion of the strong urge to push. But I was like, okay, I'm okay with this. So I think we pushed for a little bit. And then I was like, it just feels like the pushes feel off. I don't know. Like maybe I'm just like, I'm very in my head. I feel like in a lot of births that I think something's wrong always. It's probably just who I am as a person, but I was like, can you just check to make sure like I'm not feeling anything funny? So they checked and I had an anterior lip, but they're like, it's super stretchy, like it's fine. But I remember the one midwife was like, just stand up for the next contraction. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
No, I don't want to.
And she's like, you don't have to get out of the tub. Just stand up. And if your water breaks or the baby starts coming, just sit back down. And I was like, fine. I trust you. because we had built that trust throughout my pregnancy. So when she says this, I knew it wasn't just for like shits and giggles that she was like, get out of the tub. I knew it was like for something. She has a lot of experience. So I was like, fine. I stand up, and I think I must have pushed for maybe 2 contractions. I don't remember how many contraction was because it was all a blur at this point. But I remember my water like broke during one of my pushing, and I instantly sat down because I was like, F this. I no longer want to be. I don't want to be above the water when this baby starts to crown. So I remember what it was like with Lily, and I didn't love that. And so I sat down once the water broke, and I don't remember if there was a wait period between when the water broke and I started like actually delivering his head, like once I got back in the water. But I remember like feeling his head coming down. And so like intuitively put my hand there and like felt his head deliver. And the burning like was still there, but it wasn't nearly as bad. And then his head, his shoulders, like all kind of just came, like literally his head, shoulders, and body just came out, and I just like pulled him up to my chest. But I was very focused because I knew I was like, I need to like not let go of him at any point of this period of time. And I didn't know how long my umbilical cord was. So like all of these things that I know with water birth is that once I brought him up, like you can't put him back in the water because like then they took their breaths of air. And of course, once we brought him back, he was all tangled in his cord. So it was just very focused. But as soon as like they untangled him and then gave him back to me, I just remember being like, oh shit, I did that again. And I like looked at his face, his little blue face still, because he shot out of my body. His like face was bruised. And I was just like, oh my God, I did it. And like, obviously there's a photo of me of just like sure disbelief. I'm like, oh, like I did this. And like, not just like had a baby, but like I pulled him up to my chest, and I was able to like kind of stay focused enough for that entire period. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of badass. I might not be super confident about a lot of things in my life, but I pulled my baby up to my chest because I'm cool. I just felt really cool. And thankfully, like they let me like stay in the pool for as long as I needed to afterwards to like deliver the placenta in the pool. And then like I did have some heavier bleeding after the placenta came out, so we did get out of the tub at that point. But like they were very supportive of like everything that I wanted during that birth. So it was very like I had met the wifeys over FaceTime a couple times and then with my visits, but just by those visits, I had a feeling that they were very trusting in my ability to birth a baby, and they were trusting of like most people's abilities, like everyone's abilities that they had just after working with them. They were very trusting of the whole birthing process, and it was a very sacred process for them that I could just feel. And by having them on the team and like being able to build that relationship with them, even virtually, was really, I think, important. But then also being fortunate enough to have my mom and Gina there again. And this was still like the end of COVID, where originally like my mom wouldn't have been able to come, but they had done like there wasn't like a lull of the COVID time. So like they allowed her to come to the birth. My daughter could not come to the birth because it was still COVID times. And that's one thing that I did wish like she could have been there, because I think she would really enjoyed it, even though she was like 2. But I think she would have really enjoyed it because seeing her meet her brother was like the sweetest thing. But I was able to go home after 6 hours, which is what I really wanted, because I mean, it's the first baby that we added to the family, and like I didn't want Lily to be like alone, even though she wouldn't have been alone. She would have been with Gina and my mom.
She just hanging
out at her
with your dog.
all with our dogs. They'll be fine. They'll feed her. But I didn't want her to like be without us. Like she had never been alone without us for like a long period of time, or even like 2 days at Disneyland was probably like the longest she had ever been away from us, like both me and my husband. So I didn't want to have to be away from her for a hospital visit. So that was the one really big benefit, is that we were able to go home after 4 hours and spend the night with her for the first night after adding a baby. And thankfully, I luckily went into labor during the day and had a baby during the day, so I didn't have to leave in the middle of the night for labor. But that experience, I definitely learned that from my first, like I could do it, first of all. And not that it's, again, a prerequisite, but for some people it is, like to know that they could do it before they try, because it is a financial investment. Not all birth center and home births are covered by insurance. And so like it's free for some people to deliver at a hospital and not free to deliver at home or birth center. And then if you end up transferring, you don't get your money back at some places. And so that is a big financial thing that some people think about. But for me, it's something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to deliver at a freestanding birth center, and I always wanted to like experience that. So it was really like kind of check the box a little bit. But it was just an amazing experience to do because they never forced a cervical exam on me or never needed a cervical exam until I asked for one. Like, so I was admitted to the birth center without ever having a cervical exam. They just saw me and they're like, she's in labor. Like, 'cause they were very trusting of the process and then trusting in my intuition in my body. And so I think that team that I created for that birth was really one of my best that I think. I think Colin's birth was one of my favorites. I mean, there's only 3, but I really enjoyed it. And it was like the perfect lighting.
It was really peaceful.
It was so
environment, and it
peaceful.
wasn't very crowded because it was very limited. But let's get into
and now
your
Jones.
third.
So Joan, I found out we were pregnant. We wanted to have a third. We were like trying. And we found out we were pregnant. And I was like, oh, I can't deliver at the birth center because we will move before, like we were moving that December and she was due in August. And I was like, and we even contemplated, like, could we fly back to Monterey, just like stay in an Airbnb so I can deliver there? But I was realistic. That was not a possibility for like my husband's job or my job, like with MamasteFit. And I was in school. I was like, that's not realistic financially either. But I did contemplate it. And then I think the birth center here had like closed. So like I couldn't even
It was also
decide.
it's not as nice.
But like also like they weren't open. So like I couldn't even deliver there even if I wanted to. And I really wanted to have another water birth because like the one with Colin was so nice. I remember crowning with Lily and it burned. And I love it. With Colin, he also just shot out of my body. So like that's probably why crowning didn't feel as bad either. But I was like, I was so nice and peaceful. I want to do that again. I also went into Joan's birth like with the expectation that it was going to be like Colin's birth. Where
I feel like
was
that's a
going to
trend
be,
with third babies where you're like,
I
this
was
is going to be like my other
Colin's
one.
birth was a trick. So Lily was 8 pounds and Colin was 7'7". So like the path was paved. Like that's why he just shot out because like he didn't need to create a bigger path. It had already been created. But Joan's prize was 8'8". So she had to create her own path. So spoiler alert, she did not shoot out of my body. But I was expecting her to just fall out. She's my third baby. And it happened with Colin. Colin's whole labor itself was like 7 hours, not
From
very
first
long.
contraction to baby.
Yeah, like not long at all. So I was expecting the same with Joan, and that did not happen. We were 40-1. It was a Saturday. I woke up at like 3 a.m. with contractions with Joan. And
we had a photo shoot
we had
on
a
that
photo
Sunday.
shoot that Sunday. We had lots of plans at the end of this pregnancy. And it was all day. Her labor was all day. But with her, obviously I wanted a birth center birth, but it wasn't an option. So we know like after Gina was a doula, we knew the hospital in the area that I would want to deliver at. They had a tub. They don't do water births, but they had a really nice tub that I could labor in and a really nice shower, which I love hydrotherapy during labor. So I was really intentional on the hospital that I wanted. And of all of the hospitals that are nice in that area, that was the closest one as well. Like my husband was already worried about an hour and 5-minute drive to the hospital. I could not convince him if I wanted to go to an even further hospital that was just as nice.
I think this one is the nicest facility, and the midwives practice patient-oriented care by far really well.
I really enjoyed all of the providers that I saw during my prenatal visits, and they all knew who we were. So I think that also, like, I didn't work with any of them, but like they had an idea of like who MamasteFit was, and like I think almost all of them followed us. So like they knew that I knew kind of somewhat about pregnancy and birth, so they didn't have to like do a lot of education. But I was able to ask a lot of questions, even like because I've never worked at that hospital. Like, so how do they do different things? And they were very open with how they did things. And I always felt very confident whenever I would leave those visits that like even me, like have a lot of experience with birth, they were still very like made sure that I didn't have any questions, which I really, really enjoyed. And they had a birth plan template online that I could bring to the birth so that this is all of the things that they offer, which I thought was really nice. Because if I saw a midwife that I maybe never saw on any of my visits, like she would still have an idea of what I wanted. Even by looking at my chart and then reading this, she would have an idea of what I wanted, which I really, really liked that. But when I went into labor, it was a Saturday. Gina was supposed to coach that morning. I was convinced that I was just dehydrated. Denial is pretty common for my labors. I woke up. I had just nested the entire day before, like crazy. Our house was under construction still, but it was like near the ends of construction. So we got a bed in the day before for my daughter. So I like put her bed together. Like I built a bed, put the mattress on it, like made the bed, did a bunch of laundry, like because we had to do laundry at my mom's house and then walk it down because we didn't have a water heater yet. Like I was doing like lots of cleaning because there was like dust everywhere. I was just in the nesting mode. And then the next morning I was like, it's because I did too much work yesterday and I'm a little dehydrated. Like this isn't labor. And then it just continued. I think I sent a picture of my like timer to Gina and she's like, you're contracting every 2 to 7 minutes. What do you mean you're dehydrated? And I was like, nothing. It's fine.
We're working on Roxanne's confidence.
So then I was like, just in case, let me go take a shower. So I had to walk back down to my mom and dad's house. It's like 7:30 at this point. Took a shower. My mom is like, had plans to like put down sod in her front yard. And she's like, oh no. And that's also pretty on trend by my mom. Oh no. So she's freaking out a little bit. And I was just like, it's fine. I was like, I'm fine. Labor is fine. Like, what is the Ross one? I'm fine. My dad's like,
I don't know why my voice is coming out all squeaky. Like,
I'm fine. My dad's like, yeah, Roxanne's fine. She's just over there wrapping presents because I was wrapping presents for my children to open when they came to the hospital to meet their sibling. And I was like, let me just do all these things just in case. But like, we have a photo shoot tomorrow that I need to be at. So like, she's not coming today. Like, it's fine. And then Gina's like, well, what do you want to do? Like, how you feeling? And I was like, well, we need to record those reels that we've been just saying we were going to record for the past like 3 weeks that we just never recorded. And I was like, well, just in case, like today is the last day, like we should do that. So like I go to the gym, record some reels, and I'm just like pausing to be like, I just need to breathe through this. Okay, now we can continue. Like early active labor, very clearly early active. We had a client come in. We're like, just in case, like we need to leave. Roxanne is in early labor. Just lock the door as you're way out. And she's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I'm like, it's fine. After about an hour of being at the gym, though, we did get all of the reels. I think almost all the reels that we wanted to record. I was like, I can no longer be at this gym. Like I need to do not this. So I call my husband and I'm like, please come pick me up right now. So he comes, grabs me. We go to Gina's house because we're going to drop off our kids at Gina's house for just the cousin sleepover for if I am in labor, just in case. Maybe.
This might not be it though.
And my husband, he was even like, I need you to stop being wishy-washy. Like you are clearly in labor. I need you to be confident and tell me when we need to go to the hospital because we have to drive an hour and I don't want a baby in my car. I need you to not be wishy-washy. And that made me mad because I was like, I don't know when the baby's going to come. And he's just like, I don't care if we go to the hospital too early, but I need you to be confident in your decisions and not be like, maybe, I don't know. You were in labor, Roxanne. And I'm like, fine, I'll be more confident. And then it was like an hour later that I was like, let's just go. I think I'm actually in labor. Shocker, I know. Everyone's so shocked by this revelation, even though I had packed my bags and wrapped all these presents for my children. We went to the hospital. It was like 11, I think, when we decided. Gina, I think, needed to eat lunch, and that's why we waited. I think that's why I waited to decide fully. So Gina was eating, and I was like, oh, I'll eat a little snack too. And then after that, I was like, it's time to go. So Gina's done eating, so let's go. Because Gina rode with us, and my mom drove up afterwards to then drive Gina home. So we get to the hospital, definitely early, but I was contracting the whole way to the hospital. Got to the hospital, I was like 4 centimeters. I was really excited about the midwife who was on call that day. So I was excited to hopefully have a baby that day, thinking that it was going to be like 3 hours from now because that's the trend, right? So we got there at 11:12. 3 hours later, no baby. And I was like, what is this shit? Why isn't she coming? Why? It's been 3 hours. Like, this is the trend. And it's because I got to the hospital and I was still in early active labor. Like I hadn't hit active labor until when I was like, excuse me, it's been 3 hours. That's really when I hit active labor, was 3 hours in. And then that's when I started to be like, well, something must be wrong. And that's why things aren't progressing. No, it's just I just took longer to get to active labor. But I was like, she's clearly in a bad position. That's why something's wrong. So I was like, we need to do an inversion. So we did some inversions and it did pick things up. So she could have been like in a funky position.
We did some releases, like a hip flexor and lat release.
Yeah, we did a lot of releases. And I don't know if it was just like, like what is the placebo effect? Because like I just needed to do something and like distract myself from the fact that labor was taking longer than it did with Colin. Or if maybe truly she was in like a funky position. Like I have back labor with all of my labors, so it's not like doing those things relieved my back labor. No, it's still there. But she could have been like maybe extended in her chin and like it helped her adjust. Because I definitely did feel a shift after doing all of those things. And then I got into the shower. And I remember in the shower, and I think we did the tub in the shower maybe a little bit after that. In the shower, I remember feeling more sensation in my hips. And I was like, oh, this is good. This means she's progressing, moving down. This is good. And I got excited. And then I think I did maybe like 2 or 3 more contractions in the shower feeling that. And I was like, if I want to have an accidental water birth, I need to get in the tub. So I don't have a shower baby. I have a tub baby. So because I was thinking again, pushing was going to be very quick because it was quick with Colin.
It was also quick with the 2 that I had.
Gina also had very quick pushing with every kid after Adeline. So I was like, that's just the trend. We push a long time with our first, and then every subsequent one, we don't. So I was like, not feeling pushy, but I should be in the tub when I do, just in case. So we get into the tub at that point, and I did some more like hip flexor releases. And I felt when I did that with one contraction, the next one I started to feel more pressure and like I was bearing down a little bit. And at that moment, the midwife had also come in to check on us at that exact point. So then she's like, oh, you feeling pushy? And then I knew I can't have a baby in the tub, or they would like me not to have the baby in the tub, preferably. So then I think I got into my head like, oh, I can't have this baby because it was supposed to be like coming out of my body. And then she walks in and then, oops, here's a baby. So then I got into my head like, oh no, like I can't have a baby in the tub. But also pushing was a lot more like overwhelming than it was with Colin because I had to focus with Colin. Like I had something to like focus on, whereas this one was just very overwhelming. And I was remembered like my eyes were closed for most of my labors. I think I don't really remember my eyes being open and like looking around very often. I think like it's very normal for I feel like people to close their eyes during contractions. But when I was pushing, I remember opening my eyes to look at the midwife, and I just remember seeing like 4 people standing behind her. I don't know who, like it could have literally been
There was a lot of people.
It could have literally been you and mom and like the nurse and Brittany. It could have honestly been you. But I remember looking and there's a ton of people staring at me, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to pretend they're not there. But I think, and even looking back to this day, like when I got out of the tub, because I was pushing for a while and she just wasn't coming down. And I was checking and like she wasn't moving down. I should have gone to the shower or the bathroom and just like collected myself because I think I was like freaking myself out that she wasn't coming out quickly. And I was like, she's a 3rd baby. It's 6:30. Like,
I mean, just in that little tub area, because it's smaller space. You were in the tub. Patrick and me and mom were there right by you. Brittany was there, the photographer. You had your labor nurse there and the midwife. And so that's a bunch of people in that really small
and then there was more people
space.
behind them.
Because it was also like
change of shift.
And it was like the baby's being born in the tub. And so then the baby nurse is coming in, and then like they have like a lab tech or like an assistant that comes in.
There was a lot of people staring at me, and I wish I would have just went into the bathroom, even if it was like 1 or 2 contractions, just like collect myself before going to the bed. But I didn't do that. Hindsight's 2020. But I got out of the tub, went to the bed, and we pushed on the side of the bed. I do think that helped. Pushing on the side of the bed, like gravity is always our friend. But it like it doesn't feel like she was coming any lower at that point. This is when the nurse was like, hey, do you want to try some side relying release? Which at that point, probably helpful. to help me, one, just take a deep breath and relax. But also maybe it was like that lower portion of my pelvic floor because I do have some tension there. So we did some side lying release. Gina remembers like the nurse just like leaving me. Like they did put me in the position and just like walked away. I know my eyes were closed that entire time.
I had to like reach across the bed to like
But I
grab
do
you.
remember I wanted someone to push downward when they did the sideline release. Some of them were just holding, but I wanted pressure downwards because that was really nice on my back. And so Gina's doing it like reaching across and like pressing straight down. And I was like, thank you.
So I think the nurse was like, oh, she's got it. And then just left.
Yeah,
and I was like, no,
away.
you're supposed to stay
which
in
is
front
fine.
of her.
Because again, my eyes were closed, so I didn't notice. So we did that for 3 contractions, and then I got up and I wanted to be in an inversion for just a second. And Gina's like lifting the head of the bed. I was like, I don't want to do that, please. But I know it would have been helpful, and it was the right thing to do. And again, in hindsight, I could have gone into a lunge at that point too.
Something that I had
really
noticed
just didn't
at
want
this
to.
point was I could tell that you were getting overwhelmed by the number of people that were in the room and the number of people trying to talk to you at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a point of frustration for me during that labor was most of the folks there knew who we were, but for whatever reason, the nurse that we specifically had did not. And she was very kind, and I think that she's a good nurse, but she did not do a good job reading the room and would kind of keep coming in and giving lots of recommendations where it was like we weren't asking. She was just kind of like adding noise to the space. And then while you were pushing, there was just like a lot of people trying to talk to you at the same time that did not need to talk.
There was a lot of people in the room. And I think like no one had spoken, just like with Lily's birth, like there were people in the room, but like I didn't notice them because they were either behind the curtain or just didn't say a thing.
Everyone was trying to talk to you at the same time.
But like I feel because like third time mom quickly pushed a baby out with her second, like things are probably like something needed to like happen with the pushing, where maybe like I needed to try a different position. But the number, like I've noticed more people, even with my eyes closed, that were like I felt them just staring at me. And I knew that I was taking a really long time. And then I realized it's change of shifts. So like people are trying to go home. And so like the nurse that I have and the baby nurse that I have is going to have to stay late if my baby has to be born because they're going to have to chart everything that they did before the new nurse came on. And like all of these things are running through my head as I'm also actively pushing my baby out who doesn't want to come out of my body. So it was like I was definitely just a lot more stressed but I think like the midwife definitely, I feel like she was still encouraging during the process, like nothing was going wrong. Like she was never worried or like I never felt like she was panicked or like concerned anything was going wrong. It was just taking a little bit longer and that was fine. But I think the fact that I felt people just staring at me, like definitely like didn't help me feel less stressed about the matter. And then when she finally started to crown, I think I didn't have this with Colin, but with Lily, I did have some regrets of like, oh, man, this kind of sucks. I wish I had an epidural for just this portion. It's just this exact burn. I don't love it. And especially like they both like crowned for a little bit longer than Colin did. So like the burning is just a little bit longer than normal. And I felt her head coming out, but then I felt like my tailbone was also like breaking as her head was coming out. So the midwife was like, I'll do this. You just press your butt. So that was really nice. I got to like press against my tailbone for that counter pressure. And then her head was born. But I was still like, she knew I wanted to try to catch her myself. So she did a good job of like, hey, like reach down and like pull your baby up. So I could still do that, even though like maybe the head portion was a bit much, not out of the water. So I was still able to like pull her up to my chest. And then when I looked at her, I was like, well, this is why you took so much longer. Like, finally, thank you for being born, even though you took so much longer. But then like you see her cheeks and I was like, oh, you big girl, you little chunky girl. But I do remember the baby nurse kept coming over with the bulb syringe to like suction her mouth out too. Because she was meconium as well. And I did mentally spiral again that she had meconium. And
then it added people to the room.
Yeah, it added more people to the room. Yeah, and I knew more people would come to the room. So like she kept trying to suction out her mouth and I just kept being like, I'm okay. Just like wiping her mouth myself because she was crying and she was fine. She just had a little bit of like fluid in her mouth that you just had to wipe away. But I think like had I mean, not been a delivery nurse, like I wouldn't have known to like do all of those things. So it was by, I think, like my education and like the knowledge that I had, like I was able to kind of very silently advocate for myself by just like using my hands and be like, I'm okay. And then again, this is the third baby. So even though I delivered at the hospital, still had an unmedicated birth, and I still felt very empowered in the process because my midwife still believed, and like she never rushed us at all. Even though like third time baby, you think they're going to be pretty quick. I was at the hospital for like 7 hours in labor at that, like 7-8 hours in early active labor. When my previous labor, the entire labor itself was 7 hours. She never was concerned that it was taking too long or that like she just mostly didn't want to miss the birth. She's like, please call me if the baby's coming out. That's all I care about is being here. I still felt very supported, but I think having the team of you, Patrick, and my mom who've been in all my births, and even Brittany, who is a doula, she was there for birth photography because she takes amazing photos. But I think even her as a birth doula being there was also very helpful. And I felt very confident in the team that I had. But I think there were little things that were different than Colin's birth that like are just different in a hospital, like a lot more people, a lot more noises. And obviously like different. I didn't have a water birth. So like that aspect was different. But I think overall, I still felt very, very empowered by the entire thing. Had Lily and Colin been allowed to be there, I think that would have still been really cool. And I think they would have enjoyed it. Because and then we had to stay overnight, mostly because you would have had to go back to the hospital. Like I could have left at 6 hours and they would have been fine with that. But then I would have had to then I would have had to make an appointment for my pediatrician to get all the other stuff done. And I don't want to do that. So. But that was the one nice thing is that I could have left if I wanted to, and not many people even realize that, but they brought it up. They're like, I know you had an unmedicated birth on like very low risk, baby's fine. If you want to go, you can go. But I also hemorrhaged like 2 liters, so I was like, I would like to stay as well to make sure I'm okay.
So in reflection of all of your births, the thing that seems to be very similar is kind of the support that you established with each of them, even if the medical team was a little bit different each time. You were still very intentional on where you chose to give birth, which medical provider you chose to support you. Some you've had pre-existing relationships with, some you didn't. And then your like individual like family type of support team seems to be very consistent through them all to help you have these very empowering birth experiences, even if they were different and things were not exactly the way that you were hoping for. Or
I still like there's always like something that I could look back and be like, oh, maybe I could have done that. But I still feel when I think back on all of my births, they make me very proud and they like make me feel more confident in myself. And I smile and I'm happy when I look back on all of my birth stories. And I feel very fortunate that I have that because I know not everybody has that. But I think by being so intentional with the team that I had, not just like my medical providers, but also the people that I invited into the space of my birth, I think that had a really big impact on how I felt with every single birth. Every person that I invited to my birth space trusts in our bodies, in our intuition of knowing that like we would be able to identify if maybe something is wrong or if maybe I need something else. Like I am able to do that for them and they don't have to keep telling me like, oh, hey, I see this. Maybe we should try this. Or like, hey, like I think this is what I'm seeing. Maybe we should try something else because they trust that I, as the person in labor, would be able to be like, I feel like something is off, which I think that made a really big difference. And we're able to, and like all of them were willing to listen to me and what I wanted instead of what they felt was the right thing to do based off of like their education. So the one thing with all of my births that I learned is like find your team. And I think that we emphasize this a lot in our content is like finding your birth team and who you want to support you and where you're going to be giving birth and that place is also supportive. can make such a big impact. Even though I didn't work at the birth center in the hospital for my second and third birth, I was still able to have a really empowering birth experience with the team that I created. Even though there's like little things that you could always want to fix about your birth or like wish were different, I still think overall I felt very empowered because of the team that I made and the research that I did on the teams that I wanted in my birth. So I can't emphasize finding the birth team that you want to support your birth enough. Like it's the biggest thing.
So if you want more support throughout your pregnancy, check out our online prenatal fitness programs and online childbirth education course where we teach you how to move confidently throughout your pregnancy and what your options are during your birth. Because again, choosing your team to support you is probably one of the most important decisions that we make during our pregnancy to not only support our prenatal experience, but also support our birth experience. You can check out all of our courses on our website at MamasteFit.com and use code STORY10 to get 10% off any of our online offerings, and you can bundle them together to save an additional 15% off.